She's like, oh, that's so waving to people, you know? We put in applause, like I'm filming from a live studio. So today, I'm gonna make some cinnamon rolls. I'm using a recipe that I found online. This recipe claims that it's better than Cinnabon, and honestly, I haven't really had Cinnabon, but these cinnamon rolls, I make them for Christmas, I made them for Easter, all sorts of holidays, and they are very good. So I have all my ingredients out here that we're gonna need. Pretty standard. One thing that you need is buttermilk, and I never keep buttermilk, so I always substitute. I use a substitute, and basically an easy substitute for buttermilk if you don't have buttermilk is just 1 cup of milk to about 1 tablespoon of vinegar. I believe you could also use lemon juice. And I've pretty much always, like whenever a recipe calls for buttermilk, I use a substitute and it's always worked out. So if you don't have buttermilk, just use the milk and some vinegar. So I have my stand mixer out and we're just gonna make the dough. So first into the bowl of my stand mixer, I'm gonna pour out 1/4 cup of water. This is warm, and 1 tablespoon of yeast, and a 1/2 teaspoon of our sugar. And then we're gonna whisk it together with this little whisk. And we're gonna let that rest for just 5 to 10 minutes to make sure that the yeast is alive. So we're just gonna wait till it gets a little bubbly. I feel like this is such less energy than my other video. Maybe it's just me. Internally, I feel less energy. So while I'm letting this proof, all of my ingredients are room temperature, my milk, my eggs, and my butter. So while I'm letting this proof, I'm going to chop up this butter into roughly tablespoons. But just so when we go to mix it in, we will mix it in smaller chunks. All right. So our yeast is alive. We can go ahead and move on and add our other ingredients. So we're gonna add our buttermilk, which is room temperature, 2 eggs, a 1/2 cup of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract, which I like to give a generous amount of vanilla, and our 6 tablespoons of melted. Melted? Then why the heck did I need to? You would think I would know that of how many times I've made this recipe. So we're gonna melt this butter. Yeah, so the butter for the dough needs to be melted. The butter for the filling that we're gonna do later, that needs to be room temperature. But both for the filling and for the dough, you need 6 tablespoons. Our melted butter. And then using a whisk, we're just gonna whisk it together. Okay, so now we're gonna add in 2.5 cups of flour. So there's 2.5. And then still with our whisk attachment, because it shouldn't be too thick now, we're just gonna whisk it together. We're gonna add 1 more cup of flour so it'll start to get thick, so we're gonna switch to our dough hook. So now we just need to make sure that's all combined, and then once it gets combined, we're gonna knead it with the dough hook for another 5 to 6 minutes. So the dough is gonna be pretty moist, but it shouldn't be super sticky. So you're gonna wanna keep adding flour so it no longer sticks to the sides of the bowl, but it'll stick still to the bottom. So what I like to do is kind of, look at it, see it's still pretty sticky, and then I just kind of pull it off the dough hook with a floured hand and add just a little bit of flour at a time. The recipe gives you measurements. It's pretty forgiving. You just add flour until you reach a consistency that you can work with and it's not too sticky. But obviously you don't want to add too much flour either. It's still, see, this is pretty sticky. I'm gonna add a little bit more flour. I think we should be good. So I think that's good. It's in 1 ball and it's still a little bit sticky, not too dry. I can touch it and not have a lot of residue. So now we're going to transfer the dough into a lightly oiled bowl to let it sit. So just a little bit of oil, just so the dough won't stick. Just put it in there. So what I like to do is cover the dough with a slightly damp towel, and then we are just going to cover and let that sit for about an hour and a half, just till it's doubled in size. One trick that I like to do when I need to let some dough rise, but I don't really have a good warm spot for it, is I turn my oven on to the lowest possible setting for about 10 seconds, just so it can start to heat up, and then I turn it off, and then I turn my oven light on, and I leave the dough in there. It's a warm place, but it's not too warm. So now we wait for it to double in size. This is a good time to do the dishes that you have created. So it's been about an hour and a half, and we are going to prep the filling for the dough. And the filling is just 1 cup of brown sugar and 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. So we're just gonna combine that. I feel like most cinnamon roll recipes, or at least the ones that I grew up making, use cinnamon sugar, but I feel like using brown sugar really makes it so much better. So we're just gonna mix those two in a bowl. Now before we check our dough, I'm gonna get a pan ready. So I'm gonna just grease a 9x13 with this really soft butter. Now let's check on our dough. So that looks good. That looks good. Beautiful. Now is the fun part. Now we get to roll out the dough and actually start shaping the cinnamon rolls. We are going to lightly flour our surface. And we get to punch down the dough, which is fun. Ready? And we're gonna transfer it. Sprinkle some more flour. This dough is beautiful. It's perfect. So now we don't really have to knead it too much, just to get it into one ball. We're gonna roll it out to an 18 by 20 inch rectangle. It's beautiful. 18 by 20, that's huge. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but all right. So that's roughly 18 by 20. We're gonna take 6 tablespoons of butter. This butter is very room temperature. This is another difference between this recipe and a lot of cinnamon roll recipes I see, is they usually melt the butter and spread melted butter on this, which obviously you could do and it'd still be great, but I find spreading room temperature butter, it's just a lot better. I think you'll see why in a minute. It's warm in here, so it's like icing. You just wanna spread it out. And then once I get it pretty evenly distributed, I find it's easiest just to make sure. You want to leave roughly a 1-inch border around. Beautiful. All right, now we're just gonna spread our brown sugar and cinnamon mixture all over. This is why I think it's better to do it with brown sugar and room temperature butter, because if you melt the butter and use white sugar, it dissolves really quickly. With room temperature butter and with brown sugar, the mixture just sort of sits on top. So then when you roll it up, you get a really nice, clean spiral. And the brown sugar, I feel like it's just a richer flavor than just regular white sugar. Beautiful. So now we're gonna just roll it up. We're gonna roll it up this way. And I like to roll it up as tight as I can because I like a nice clean spiral. That way you have more layers of cinnamon, which is just everything you want in a cinnamon roll, obviously. This is looking really good. And then just sit it on the seam there. And I like to pat the edges in, so we don't have super thin ends. It's a nice log. That looks good, that looks really good. Now we're just gonna cut them into roughly 1-inch rolls. And I think you're supposed to get 12. 1 inch or 1.5 inches? An inch and a half. Inch and a half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep, so now we're just gonna cut it. Look at that. See that nice tight spiral? It's gonna be good. That looks so nice. I'm not gonna do that though. So now we just have them spaced out in the greased pan. So now we're just gonna cover this with plastic wrap. We're not gonna fully close it. We want a little bit of air to be able to get in because they are gonna proof for a second time. So there needs to be somewhere for the air to go. Yeah, so we're gonna let them rise again for roughly another hour, just till they double in size. They should puff up a lot again. Just making sure to not seal it all the way so there's somewhere for the air to go. And then we're just gonna let it proof for another hour. Yeah, well, you got it. So they have done their second proof and they look really good. The ends definitely didn't roll them out too well, but they'll still be delicious. And obviously we still have some beautiful looking cinnamon rolls, so it'll be good. The oven's at 375 and we're just gonna bake them for 18 to 22 minutes and then we'll ice them. The oven's ready. 18 to 22 minutes. After that, we'll make the icing. So while the cinnamon rolls are baking, I'm gonna make the icing for it. The recipe that I'm using uses a cream cheese frosting, which a lot of cinnamon roll recipes use, but not a huge fan of cream cheese frosting, and I also don't have cream cheese. So it's really easy to wing just a regular icing though, which is some powdered sugar, some milk, some melted butter is not necessary, but can't go wrong with a little bit of melted butter, and some vanilla. So I really just kind of wing it to get the consistency that I want and the flavor. We're gonna start probably with 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. Just mix it together. It's important to taste it. That's probably a good consistency. You want to be able to pour it. Yeah, that looks good. And it tastes good too. So right when the rolls come out of the oven, we're gonna pour this icing over and then they're ready to go. Obviously they're best warm, like right out of the oven. That's when they will be their best. You can't really beat a hot cinnamon roll with icing just poured over it.
That one looks suppressed.
I know. That one and like that one, that they don't really have.
You decided to make a biscuit?
They don't really have any filling. All right. They're about to come out. So we will pour this over top. But there you go. I'm gonna let it cool a little bit and then I'm gonna try one. But they look delicious. Which one? It's gonna be really hot. I didn't really wait. It's been about 2 seconds since I took them out of the oven, but we're gonna pull this out here. I really need a spatula, but ooh, look at the inside. Delicious. I'm just gonna go right for the good part. That's really hot. It's so good though. Well, there you go. You should make these because they're delicious. Bye. Until next time.